Hello! So today I will be talking about the Miskito people who originally inhabited the lands of the Nicaraguan area. So I decided to research the Miskito people because in February 2020, right before the lockdown, I was so lucky to go on a Caribbean cruise, and one of the stops was Roatan, Honduras. So it isn't the exact place that the Miskito peoples inhabited, but it is roughly 8 hours away, I believe. So when I went there, I fell in love with the culture there. It is so fascinating, and the land there is absolutely beautiful. And on top of that, actually, on one of my excursions, there was a individual from this culture, so I got a brief encounter with him, and he was the sweetest person ever. So that's what inspired me to research the Miskito people. So today in my presentation, I will be talking about how the Miskito people originally were from the Nicaraguan area, but then they ended up fleeing to Honduras as an escape from the Nicaraguan government and the effects of colonization. With that, my research will include the land that the Miskito people inhabit and the food that they cultivate from that land, because they were living on land that was a very wet land, and they would have to make food and certain dishes from the food that they got from their land. On top of that, I will be discussing some of the background information of the Miskito people, such as their languages that they speak, their current population, their religions that they practice, and so on. And along with that, I will also talk about the customs and traditions that they hold, and as well as roles of men and women in the culture, along with the role of deities and the roles of their leaders within their groups. So, as mentioned before, I will be talking about the Miskito people of Nicaragua, and it's by Madison Huber for my Indigenous 100 class. Within this presentation, I will be focusing on 3 learning outcomes. The first outcome I hope to inform you about is the history of the Miskito peoples, and how they were forced to flee to Central America due to the colonization of the Nicaraguan government. I also hope to talk about the type of land they reside on and the benefits of living on that land. Secondly, I desire to share background information of the Miskito peoples, such as their languages, their distinct land measurements, and their current population. Finally, I hope to discuss their customs and traditions that briefly summarize their way of life. So who are the Miskito peoples? The Miskito peoples are the second largest indigenous group in Honduras, Central America. This group also goes by the names of Mystique or Miskito, and they are known to inhabit the lowlands of the Caribbean coast of Nicaragua. However, according to Encyclopedia Online, they encountered Christopher Columbus while on his 4th voyage, which initiated their first contact with the Europeans and set the stage for their ongoing contact with them since the mid-17th century. With saying that, in class we've learned about the process of colonization, and this is no different. The Europeans became a heavy influence on the Miskito peoples, which led to them fleeing to Honduras in the 1980s. And as a result of this colonization, the Miskito peoples became a distinct group. So the land of the Miskito peoples. The Miskito peoples inhabit on land that is a mixture of land and water environment. According to the Nicaragua Political Geography, the land they inhabit has a land area of 37,000 square kilometers, which extends 900 kilometers along the Caribbean and then 400 kilometers towards the Rio Coco River. On their land, there's a mixture of pine savannas, saltwater, freshwater, lagoons, rivers, creeks, gallery forest, mangrove swamps, and coastal waters. However, the heart of the Miskito people's land is known as the Coco River, which is one of the largest rivers that are within Central America. Due to this type of landscape, the group relied on hunting and fishing for their food supply. They captured a variety of water animals such as turtles, shrimp, manatee, tapir, deer, peccary, iguana, and so on. However, they were also able to utilize the art of farming to get a variety of different foods. They cultivated foods such as bananas, corns, beans, rice, potatoes, sugarcane, coconut, mango, breadfruit, papayas, and so on. When looking at the food they utilized and still use today, the Miskito peoples configured dishes that are derived from their peoples. For example, according to the Nicaragua Political Geography Encyclopedia, there is a stew that is named rundown. Rundown is a dish that consists of green bananas, plantains, manioc, root crops, fish, and coconut milk. Another Miskito dish that is utilized is taking fruits or vegetables and wrapping them in leaves and burying them underground to wait till they have gone bad and soured a little bit, and then they unbury them and eat them. Finally, a common drink is wapul, which is made of mashed bananas, plantains, and water. So, information about the Miskito peoples. The Miskito peoples are a distinct culture that has specific attributes that make their culture unique. Within their peoples, they tend to focus on the three main languages. They speak dialects of Miskito, English, and Spanish. According to Tillman, the Miskito peoples that still reside in Honduras today have become largely Hispanicized. With that, Miskito is still utilized as their dominant language, but the Spanish language is taught in their schools and tends to replace English in most situations. When looking at the population of the Miskito peoples today, it is approximately 200,000. However, according to Helm, the 200,000 people do not reside in all one place. For example, Helm found that 150,000 of the Miskito peoples returned back to their land in Nicaragua and remained to be the largest indigenous group there. And then roughly 50,000 of them still reside in Honduras. When looking at the remaining Miskito peoples, it is noted that they tend to practice three main religions. The three religions they practice are Moravian Church, which is what the majority of the peoples practice, Catholicism, and fundamentalist Protestantism. So what and who is the Miskito culture? This culture is very unique in so many ways, and I found it very interesting to dive deeper into their culture and some of their ways of life. Within every society, there are roles that are thought of to help the group function in a successful way. Therefore, the Miskito culture also utilizes roles for individuals to follow to help their everyday lives function a bit better. Within the group, there are roles that are specific to men and roles specific to women. The men have the roles that focus on taking charge in areas such as performing medicinal and secular songs. The men would perform the songs of healing by vocal tension, while the secular songs would be done in a more relaxed performance. Along with that, the men did the majority of the hunting and fishing in order to get food to feed their peoples. On the other hand, the women's roles are very important because the Miskito culture is a culture that focuses on matriarchal ways. Therefore, within the group, the women were the ones that held on to the traditional customs and values. Along with that, they would perform some domestic work around the land that consisted of farm work, planting, weeding, and harvesting. Now, if we move away from the roles of men and women, the Miskito peoples have distinct cultural traditions. The Miskito culture has many aspects and traditions that make their culture different from others. For instance, a belief that the Miskito peoples have is that they can predict death through dreams. Therefore, many of the deaths that were present in their culture were known about before they actually happened. Within their culture, they utilize personnel such as healers, diviners, and exorcists. Through persecution of these roles, there are two practitioners, herbalists and shamans. These practitioners utilize a variety of treatment techniques, but the herbalists make diagnoses based on the patient's dreams, while the shamans rely on verbal phrases and chants. The Miskito peoples believe that the reasoning behind contracting an illness is from the gods, evil spirits, or simply from the weather. Along with that, the Miskito peoples believe in many different supernatural figures. These supernatural figures are deemed to have many powers that affect the lives of the Miskito peoples. For instance, the Miskito peoples believe that these supernatural figures have the power to affect the overall health of people, the power to grow crops or fail crops, and have power over whether the peoples have a good or bad hunt. Overall, the Miskito peoples hold very intriguing beliefs that differ from other indigenous groups and largely differ from that of European culture. And honestly, that is why I think this culture is so fascinating. Their beliefs, traditions, and way of life are very unique and hold great meaning, and I will definitely be looking into it further. When looking at the concepts and texts we have looked at in class, they are clearly the same ideas and concepts as indigenous groups of Saskatchewan to those of the Miskito peoples. A main comparison that I want to look at is the roles portrayed in both groups. As mentioned prior, the Miskito people have distinct gender roles For instance, the men are the ones that take charge in areas of starting ceremonies and rituals, and they are the ones that perform the hunting and fishing typically. While on the other hand, women are the ones that hold on to the traditional values and customs and perform domestic work. When comparing these roles to the Indigenous groups in Saskatchewan, there are some similarities. According to the Treaty Elders of Saskatchewan text, every individual had a role in society. It mentions that there are hunters within the Saskatchewan Indigenous groups, just like many other Indigenous groups. On top of that, each Indigenous group has their own spiritual traditions and ceremonies. For example, as mentioned above, one that the Miskito peoples possess is that of predicting death through dreams, and that is just one example. Now, when referring to our text, it mentions within the Treaty Elders of Saskatchewan that two examples of ceremonies they practice are the potlatch and the sundance. Therefore, when comparing the two groups, their different traditional ceremonies, it is very clear that they both hold special importance. But each ceremony has a different meaning and importance behind it. And I think that is something very important to note, that just because things are different than something that you know, it does not mean it is any less important. Both practices are seen as highly valued and respected throughout the tribes. So these are the resources that I used to gather my information for this project. I just wanted to thank you for your time and for your interest in the Miskito peoples of Nicaragua who fled to Honduras, and I hope I presented you with information that resonated with you and you were able to take something from this presentation. I can gladly say that this project has informed me about so much and has opened my eyes. I loved learning about a different culture, and I think that's what makes this world so interesting, is that just because there are differences between groups, it doesn't make one inferior to others, and therefore we should work on becoming a whole. Differences don't make us better than anyone else. Differences are what make this world unique and interesting. If we were all the same, this world would be so boring. And I think that's one thing that everyone has to learn, that just because groups are different, they are not inferior or that group is not superior. We are all just living here on this beautiful land.